Шановні колеги, колежанки і гості, вітаємо вас всіх на цій публічній презентації дослідження «Вплив війни на молодь 2024». Мене звуть Вікторія Демідова, і я керівниця проєкту підтримки громадянського суспільства та молоді про ООН в Україні, і сьогодні матиму честь модерувати цю подію. Наша подія фізично відбувається тут, в Українсько-Данському молодіжному домі, а також у нас є онлайн-трансляція на Фейсбуці українською мовою і на Ютубі про ООН англійською мовою. Сьогоднішня подія присвячена презентації результатів дослідження «Вплив війни на молодь в Україні», яке проведено агенцією InfoSapiens за ініціативи Міністерства молоді та спорту в Україні, за підтримки ПРООН в Україні та за фінансування Європейського Союзу та уряду Данії. Окрім презентації, у нас сьогодні буде обговорення про практичний вимір використання результатів дослідження, на яке ми запросили цікавих спікерів і спікерок. Це буде друга частина сьогоднішньої події. Також сьогодні ми в гостях у команди Українсько-Данського молодіжного дому тут в фізичному просторі. І це не
house, and this is not by chance, because it's here because all the many ideas for youth originate here, and this is what I want to start this event by inventing our youth team for a greeting. And I also want to invite a director of Ukraine Danish. Are you with us?
Yes, I am. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you so much, and welcome everybody to the Ukrainian Danish Youth House. I am very proud that we can host this event, and I'm very happy to have all you esteemed guests in our space here in Kiev. I will just say that this is a very big event for us. We know that this war has taken away the access to a normal youth for most Ukrainian young people, and it's really important that we keep supporting the possibilities of being active citizens and having a life that can also generate hope when times are tough. So that's what we work with. We try to support young people in staying active, in engaging in society, in keep creating a future that they can see themselves in. I'm very happy that Denmark is a very supportive actor in this. So the Danish government, apart from supporting the study that you will hear about now, also supports the Ukrainian Danish Youth House, and as you know, of course, heavily with the defense. And I'm really happy to see that not only the Danish government, but also Danish people feel very supportive of Ukraine. We are very focused on making life meaningful for the young people who are growing up and developing in Ukraine today. And of course, to do this in a meaningful way, we need to know what are the needs so that we can meet those needs with the work we do. And for this reason, I think it's super important to have this research done by the UNDP and the Ministry for Youth and Sports so that we know what we're dealing with. On this note, I'll just wish you welcome and pass the word to my colleagues who will tell you a little bit more about our project. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you very much, Julia. I want to invite Andy Marushak. He's right here. Thank you very much to everyone, dear partners, dear guests. I will tell you a little bit about ourselves, and we are going to start a presentation. As a host of this event, I will tell you briefly about our project, and I hope that many of you know about us already, but in the future we are going to have even more denser collaboration, tighter. I will tell you first about the space in which we are all now, and this room. This is a platform which works in Ukraine starting from 2020, and we unite Ukrainian and Danish youth But when the war began, we started to support more actively Ukrainian youth in their changes, in their development. And I'll tell you briefly what we do in Ukraine. In brief, we have our own projects and programs which we implement for youth in various parts of Ukraine. For example, in the east and in the south, it's a huge project. We have a project called School of Dialogue, and another program is going to be started tomorrow. And we have also an art platform to support youth that make first steps in their areas. And downstairs you could see two art laboratories. Unfortunately, you won't see the artists today, but normally those artists come over to us and work on their pieces of art right here. Also, we have very important mission to provide instruments and tools to the youth. By the way, we left our guidelines about dialogues and guidelines on democracy, and everyone who works with youth, you're welcome to have those brochures. And if you want to have English versions of those guidelines, you can have them as well. And the space in which you are now provides a possibility for youth, so that youth would develop, and we try to help that youth as much as we can. We provide support to them. The youth can organize trainings or other events. Like I said already, art platform. We also have a room for podcasts, which youth is using. This is an example of how we can create a space and support youth without giving them concrete instructions. This is our approach, our democratic approach, because we are building a democratic structure here, and this is why we support youth in those areas where the youth needs that support. For example, if they want to develop one or another direction, we just provide them support, facilitate their work. And everyone who's interested in our work, you can get to know more about us in our social networks. Like I said already, our main focus is youth until the age of 35. And we are very happy to see here those people who use our space already and support it with other projects. And a great news that we have another office in Mykolaiv, and in January we are going to open up a new space there, and this is what we do. So everything we do here in Kiev, we are going to do in Mykolaiv as well. And we also have grants in 6 areas, and these are our main areas of activity. And we have a separate tract from Mykolaiv and separate tract for youth centers. Last year we started to work with youth centers, and we are very happy to support youth with the knowledge and other possibilities to support their capacity in other spaces where youth can work in the regions. So this is what we do. And I'm going to wrap up my story here. I'm very glad that we are all here today, and we are going to be very happy to collaborate with you in the future. Now, we are also open to any other projects with youth, those, for example, that plan to work with youth in the future. If you need space for that work, if you want to have a training or team building, whatever, you can do it here. We are happy and to welcome everyone. Now, if you're going to have any questions, I'm here, my colleagues are here, and I wish you all a very positive event. I am very happy that our colleagues do this work, because we use this work, and this is a very important piece of work which helps people like us to focus on youth even further, and help them implement the goals which are essential and important today. And this is why we do our researches, and we're very thankful for UNDP for this project that you do help us do this, and that's about it. That's about all I wanted to say. Thank you very much, Andriy. I thank you also to this space and this possibility, and we move forward. I will very briefly talk about the safety, because I want to say that if we are going to have air alert again, we will have to move down to the bottom floor, the place where we had coffee today. But thank God. God, we don't have an alert now, and I want to invite Andriy Chesnakov from the Minister of Youth and Sports. I would like to sit down to be equal, to feel equal to you. I think it is very important, especially today, to be equal, peer-to-peer principle. And this is the area we develop. We are going to use this. We are going to present a study today, but before we move to that study, I want to say a few words about what Andriy had said, who actually forgot to say that Ukrainian Danish Youth House, as well as the project in Mykolaiv, those are the projects based on international support. And I would like to also ask my colleagues, while you implement that project and when you organize competitions for other partners who took part in today's event, when you implement that project, these grant programs to support youth centers, please take into account strategic documents, Ukrainian strategic documents in the area of youth policy, as well as those documents which have been developed by Ukrainian Danish Center and our ministry for the work with youth, because this work where development is supported, so that this work is done not for the sake of pilot projects, but to strengthen Ukraine, to strengthen positions of our government in the area of youth policy. You know all these projects, and we have to implement these projects together with the youth. Now, when we move to the main goal of our meeting today, I would like to, first of all, thank the team of UN, which is always active, creative, and they always search for new possibilities, and they were great in combining this project with many other initiatives, it's a very good thing that we can learn about all those new initiatives, about this house, about this space, and as we saw already, very interesting projects are being implemented, and initiatives and measures and projects, initiatives. I would like to once again I want to emphasize once again that the program of UN development is a very UN is our strategic partner of Ukrainian government in implementation of youth policy. At the time when many of our partners, for the predominant part of our partners, we can the very few projects were not involved in the projects of humanitarian aid. Most of them were involved into these projects, even during the time when we have the most difficult situation in the country. During the time we conducted the first wave of this study. So what I want to say is that UN, even at that time, they were thinking about youth, and the UN team was able to support us, and we conducted the first wave of this study, and the main goal of this study was to understand a negative impact on the youth under those catastrophic situation which we had in many regions at that time. At the same time, we saw We saw the increase in patriotic feelings, unity and common vision of our country, and focusing on the victory. I think those things were very important at that time when the study was conducted, because we just during past weekend we had a forum of youth work where many studies were presented, and those people who work in the area with youth, they learned a lot about new studies which were conducted. But for me, as a person who has economic background, I always take a close look at the sample, at the number of respondents, and in this area, the UN team and those other organizations which implemented this team, I'm talking about InfoSapiens, their sample is at least 2,000, which is representative. In this study, we also have a study of youth which are now located abroad. This is additional bonus to this study. And based on starting from the second wave, when the goal of the study was to a perception of youth, of current situation, their economic possibilities, educational possibilities, informational and communication technologies, and what impact they had on the youth, markers.
So for us, this data is really quite valuable, namely to be used in this research. And I'm confident in it. So even while we were waiting for this research, why? Because we plan to develop an annual report about the condition of youth in Ukraine. And our plan is to do the thematic research, since we are working in the statistics limits. So this will be on the let's say pillars of the youth policy, and we would like to cover the period starting from the full scope invasion till the end of 2024. That's why for us this research being presented today will also serve as a basis, plus this is additional factor comparing to all other surveys and researches being done by today to show the dynamics. And this is really it's hard to overestimate. And while we were developing the target program for youth in Ukraine, we got the idea that we have to replenish the strategy of Ukraine till 2030. Plus, we have to form the calendar action plan. That's why all this information, all this data being shown in this research is quite valuable for us. We will listen yet to the presentations, speech, and we use carefully all the sources. So maybe the data presented will be really, let's say, quite simple in speaking by themselves, but there, first of all, we have to see the situation behind the numbers. And for me, this is really a basis providing for the development to be close to the reality, and namely the international partners could see themselves for their 5-year planning, sure, with all the, let's say, impacts of the war, and for example, the elements such as fighting the discrimination or combating the discrimination, they stay in the background, but they are nevertheless the same valuable, since they comprised in, in reflected in youth policy and minority policy. For example, the Greeks on Azov area, they suffered a lot because of the war and occupation. Most of them became IDPs, and for their community and also the Roma community, Czech community, other minorities communities. So we have to develop the policy basing on real numbers being presented as a result of the real research work. Thank you very much for this research. Thank you for your efforts. Thank you for your attention. I'm looking forward for the report to be presented, and once more, my deep appreciation to UNDP for their vision and support for the youth policy in Ukraine and preserving the Ukrainian identity. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Andrei, for such appreciation for our work. And now I would like to invite the Deputy Representative, Deputy Resident Representative of the UNDP in Ukraine.
Well, like Andrei, to be at par and at equal footage. It's truly a pleasure for me to be part of this event this morning, first and foremost in partnership with the Ministry of Youth and Sports, but also the symbolism of being here in the Danish-Ukrainian Youth House. Because not only the fact that this study in specific was supported by Denmark and the EU, but also the symbolism and the philosophy behind this space. So it is extremely important for me to start with these words of appreciation for hosting us this morning, but also the way that we are framing this study. A study for youth to look at the challenges, as the Deputy Minister mentioned, the impact of war on youth, but also build on the opportunities and emphasize and echo and amplify the opportunities youth can have and will have in the coming period. And I would argue the role and the responsibility that this period sheds on youth as well. It is very important for me to start by emphasizing, echoing, strengthening, stressing on the importance of building evidence in this period. It is critical for Ukraine, for the Ministry of Youth and Sports, for all ministries to have, and civil society and other stakeholders, to have valid data to influence and also inform policy. We're talking about evidence-based policy making, talking about evidence-based programming. We are very happy to be also hearing the vision of the ministry itself that is translating the data into the national programs, into the national policies. We're talking about Vidnova, the National Youth Program, and other strategies. But most importantly, looking at how this valuable data influences and impacts the ecosystem that brings youth together. We spoke about, or the Youth Center presenter, Andrei, referenced the centers. We're talking about a new ecosystem. It's important to hear also the voices of youth on how to evolve this ecosystem. Because ultimately, what we're all trying to do, UNDP, the international partners, is really to look at opportunities and spaces for democratic participation, for active, effective participation in the recovery process of Ukraine. We are not talking only about youth as end beneficiaries, as target audience. They're actually stakeholders in the process. And this is the philosophy that the ministry has always projected. This is the philosophy that the international community has. And of course, this is the philosophy and approach and aspiration of every single young man and woman in Ukraine, and child, I would argue, where we are talking about a recovery process that is different. I do not like to refer to youth as being the future. This is actually rhetoric, basic rhetorics. We're talking about the youth being part and parcels. These are stakeholders exactly like civil society is, like the elderly are, or the age population is, like the private sector is. And this is where the equilibrium is so important on ensuring an alignment between policy, strategies that are informed by data, and this is the importance of this particular contribution, small contribution, I would argue, that UNDP is providing and bringing to the table. But most importantly, the ecosystem, and of course, finally, the capacities and the investments in youth. And this is where, allow me a tangent and looking at the whole ecosystem and the whole approach in a broader sense, where we have also, as international partners and in support and the Ministry of Youth and Sports, to ensure that the other ministries come to the table as well. We're talking about economic revival. We're talking about a recovery that is different, greener, transformative, more inclusive, transparent. What would all this mean if not investing in youth? Youth have to play a role in this process, but youth have to be invested in as an end beneficiary, but also as a stakeholder. And this is where we strongly believe at UNDP in bringing all the stakeholders' engagements to the table and making sure that we're talking about economic revival with the youth being actually, as we mentioned, and as the colleagues in the House mentioned, in the Youth House mentioned, investing in grants in youth, investing in ecosystems in youth, investing in actually monitoring the engagement and interaction between the youth and the local authorities. Because it's beautiful to say we are all for democratic and engagement and participation. If this is not actually monitored effectively, what does this mean? And this is where the data and the study comes into play. And this is where we strongly believe that such engagements have to be sustained. And we thank very much the government of Denmark here and the House for this investment, and also the EU. But most importantly, it is a shared responsibility for all of us to ensure that we're monitoring and we're following up. And if it doesn't work, we have to correct course. And this is where the leadership of the ministry, thank you very much, Andrei, Deputy Minister, but also the whole leadership, the Minister himself, and the whole leadership of the ministries is so important, because it is not only upstream policy making. It is monitoring the policies, monitoring the impact, and making sure that we have the systems in place, the ecosystems built, and most importantly, providing the opportunities to youth to engage. And if it doesn't work, correct course as we move forward. So thank you very much for the opportunity once again. It's truly a pleasure being here on behalf of all the team of UNDP, and we will continue definitely supporting youth and supporting the ministry and supporting definitely a different recovery process of Ukraine. Дуже дякую.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Christoforos. Thank you very much for welcoming words. So let's not wait. Let's switch to the presentation. And for that, I would like to invite Anastasia Shramkova, the InfoSapiens agency. Good morning, dear friends. Dear guests, I'm very happy to welcome you here. I'm very happy to be here to present you the results of our research, since it's really a big honor for us. And we really we're inspired to show the results of our work. So I'm very thankful for that opportunity. Actually, the words were said about what's the aim of this research, what is it. We do it annually, and actually our team who did these last 2 waves of the study, we were involved in one since 2015. That was very first time of our importance, but since this time the focus shifted, social dynamic changed. That's why the research was reformatted in order to provide the response to really actual issues, namely the response and attitude to the use of the current situation, what are their aspirations, what are their desires, namely the situation with vulnerable groups like people with disability and other vulnerable groups. Stability, consolidation of the society is also a very important topic of the research. I will dwell on it as well. So, and also as youth see their participation in the recovery process.
I will begin by methodology for you to understand where this data comes from, and I'm very happy that some people in this room, they pay attention to methodology. It's a very good thing, because this is and I believe that this is going to be a very important information for the rest of you as well. Now we will focus on 2 studies, 2023 and 2024. Over 2,000 people were questioned at the territory of Ukraine. There was a personal questioning, randomly chosen, and it's a very representative study, because all of Ukraine was covered. A separate component is questioning of research which was conducted on the youth abroad. We questioned them remotely. But again, we had a random sample, which is very important for representativity of this study. So we sent these SMS messages to Ukrainian numbers which were in roaming. Kyivstar and Vodafone were 2 operators which helped us with those SMS studies. They randomly sent those text messages and invited young people to participate in this study. We had a sample over 400 participants. Divided by the country, we divided those respondents by the country. We didn't, of course, needless to say that Belarus and Russia were not included into the sample. We also see that now we are going to talk about a quantitative and qualitative component. As for qualitative component, we conducted in-depth interviews where we studied the needs of young people, which represented vulnerable groups. I will briefly talk about these results, very briefly, but you will see in the conclusions all those results, all the data which describes this qualitative component. Now, the first block that I would like to tell you about is perception of a current situation, the loss that young people feel in the result of war. The most important question we asked our respondents was choose among the problems those which relate to you, and you may see what they answered. You may see dynamics here when we look at 2024 and 2023. There's some differences. As for the losses caused by war, that the youth feels. Youth in Ukraine. What we see here, we see that in the first place we have a decrease in income. But the positive sign here is that the share of young people that chooses this, it changed. This trend is about the same as it was in 2023. So financial situation is less important. Financial situation is less, but what impresses is that we see the double of a very sad, actually, answer: deaths of friends or relatives. You may see a some difference between those 2 years. Now, among top problems which were indicated is the worsening of psychological health and interruption of relationships with friends and acquaintances. This problem is becoming larger, bigger with the year. So this is the factor which is very concerning. Another factor which dropped substantially, and it's a factor, the problems with electricity. The situation improved, and the first wave you had during that winter of 2023, when we had lots of power outages, and the situation got better in 2023. This is why we see this good, positive dynamics. But it is caused, as you understand, by the seasonal factors. Now, when we go to the move to the youth abroad, the picture here is different. If we ask them what problems they see, the main problem abroad is the worsening of mental health, decrease in mental. That's what they indicate. 2/3 of our respondents indicate that they have problems with mental health. We also see that this problem is important in Ukraine as well, but the share of respondents is twice smaller. Now, separation with family members, 2/3 of young people are upset by the fact that they are separated with their family members. The next indicator, now, the decrease in the income. This factor is not that important for youth. This is not a big problem. Plus, this factor is getting better for both groups, in the country and outside and abroad. Now, we also had another question about problems. You can see here the comparison with 2021, because this is a lengthy, longitudinal study. This personal problems which bother the youth the most. In the past question, we asked about families, and in this case, we asked about personal problems. And the results here, they correlate with the previous question, but we can also indicate the following. We see another trend here, trend which decreases. So the financial factor is on a decrease, and the first place is health, mental health and physical health. But we also see here the signs that youth in Ukraine started to adapt to the conditions of war, and they started to worry about problems which are not directly related to the war. For example, we have this problem, the absence of leisure time. They want to have more leisure time. Another problem that we see here, that the absence of possibility for self-realization. That's the problem that many people indicate. So they, on one hand, they get adapted to the conditions of war, and the main problems that arise, which are typical for the youth, we see the absence of leisure time and absence of possibilities for self-realization. So those are pretty much the same problems which were raised even before the war. Now, if you go abroad, the biggest problem, the largest problem, and this problem is getting worse, is mental health. Bad mood, depression, anxiety. Everybody knows that people that move abroad, they feel anxious, and I actually worry about the situation here in Ukraine even more than we Ukrainians do. Now, the health of relatives and friends also a very important factor. And what we see here is the increase of negative impact of mass media and social networks. We will see later that this social space is very important for the youth. This is a very important space, environment. This is why this factor is very important, and brain rot, dependency on toxic content online. So this is something which affects our youth abroad. Now, to the next slide. Over here we dig deeper into the problem of mental health. We already saw that this problem of mental health is very important, especially for those who are abroad. And we ask these two questions. Do you need psychological support? And another question, are you ready to receive free of charge psychological and anonymous free of charge psychological support? And we see that the youth abroad is a lot more willing to receive psychological support. They actually manifest their need to receive psychological support. As for the youth in Ukraine, is not that conscious about the need in psychological support, but we also see young people that indicate the fact that they need psychological support, and more young people require and want to receive psychological support. Now the question, are you ready to receive psychological support? The youth abroad, the readiness to receive is going down a little bit. We can talk about the factors that determine this, but in Ukraine, the readiness to receive free of charge and anonymous psychological support is on the increase. And we actually studied this factor deeper, and I want to say that this need is mostly expressed by young women. Those are young women that want to receive psychological support. And the young women are a lot more ready to receive that support. Now, next block that I want to talk about is what prevents social cohesion. And the first slide is a trust to social institutions in Ukraine. This is a very important factor that determines social cohesion. And here we see the trends which are pertinent to our society now. It's decrease of trust to official institutions. We all remember how in 2022 we have an explosion of trust to social institutions, but then this trust was going, even though it was high, it was going down and down. And we can especially see this trend when we look at such things as places as cabinet of ministers, government. People don't trust those institutions that much anymore. However, they trust in armed forces of Ukraine, and this indicator remains quite high. Now also, volunteer organizations preserves the trust. At least we do not see a substantial drop in trust to volunteering institutions. And this is a factor which we have to keep in mind and base our work on this factor. Now, migrations moves, another very important factor for the youth, especially for the youth which try to structure their life here in Ukraine. The question we ask, starting from 2021, do you want to immigrate from the country? And the answer here is this: negative. Some people say, I'm staying here. And also there are people that want to immigrate from the country. People may say that they want to immigrate temporarily. We are going to focus on the first. First, we're going to focus on those who want to remain in the country. This share, despite the war, increased. There were fewer people in 2023 that wanted to immigrate. We have more of such people in 2024. And this is a very positive factor that we have to take into account.
So for this 40% who responded, so considering for the migration or moving abroad, we asked what are these causes for migration. Over there, these are the responses only for these 40% who voted for migration. So again, the material factor is not the main one. Yes, it says among the major, but in case in 2023, 51% opted for the, let's say, earning more money abroad. Now, the main factors, also, first of all, the personal safety, because risk to and threat to my life and my relatives' lives. And also the youngsters are, let's say, not confident in democracy in Ukraine. Also, migration aspiration of the youth in Ukraine also were, let's say, assessed in other surveys. And over there, the responses to the question, do you plan to get back to Ukraine? So we see that the sure I will share decreases. But, you should keep in mind that these responses are being given by different persons. So those who said, yes, I will return in 2023, they already returned. Now, those who yet not have taken the decision, it's 33 unsure that not, also increasing from 6 to 19%, and those who responded hard to answer also increased from 2 to 16% in 2023. That's why these are the challenges we have to work with. Next block of my presentation is devoted to factors restoring and strengthening the stability. And the main factor for any person, these are the basic needs, material factor. So material factor is one of the big challenging one, and also the reason to migrate abroad. But we've seen that the importance of this factor is being reduced. And also we see the increase in those who feel more or less stable. This dynamic is really positive and also being supported by other data from our survey, and also the slight increase of the material condition also is evidenced by the stable work. So we see the slight increase of those who have stable work and those who study. It means these youngsters study at schools, vocational schools, institutes, and we see the slight decrease of the share of those who are seeking employment. Here it is. So that's all I wanted to say. Let's go to the next block of the data. We will switch the topic. We will go from basic things, like financial material, we will go to ideological factors. So we asked youngsters whether or not they feel changes in national identity attributes. So which are these attributes? So Ukrainian consent, using Ukrainian language in regular life, volunteering, buying the Ukrainian manufactured items, and we see that the majority of these aspects, we see the balance shifted to the increase of such importance. It's really nice that's over half of the sampling. The importance of consuming Ukrainian content increased. Also, speaking Ukrainian language increased. Volunteering increased. Ukrainian items also increased. But unfortunately, I think internal tax office will not be happy, since the youngsters don't see the importance in paying taxes. But this can be, and also the elections, I think it's because due to the wartime, the youngsters don't pay big importance to these factors. So now, about the Ukrainian language, we asked what language you use to socialize with your friends, and this is the data, the 2024, and these are for 2020. The first column is for 2021, and the last one for 2024. And we see that the share of using Ukrainian language increases, and say the Russian language is less used. Next, where do you use Ukrainian language? In public, mostly. And also my children also use Ukrainian language, communicating with in all public areas, and they also use it more with their friends, and that almost twice they drop down the usage of Russian language. So youngsters are truly devoted to the EU integration of Ukraine, namely the support of accessing NATO in EU is really big and stays big. We see the slight decrease, in fully supporting, but nevertheless, in the absolute figures, the support stays on a really very high level, and so we should keep it in mind, since these are the aspirations of youth in Ukraine. Also, here we have the mistake on the slide. So let's take the lower diagram. We asked the young Ukrainians of how acceptable they see the option of territorial losses of Ukraine as the price for peace or frozen conflict. And we see that the part of those for whom the territorial losses are unacceptable stays really great. It's 77%, but we see the increase in those who are eager to accept some, let's say, losses of territories. And this correlates to the general survey of the population in Ukraine. Next, let's talk about volunteering. Notwithstanding the thoughts are running that around that so the volunteering goes down and etc. No, that's not true. We see that the share of of young Ukrainians who joined the volunteering is increasing. But please pay attention to the share of those who are not involved in volunteering at all. And we see the constant and steady decreasing of this part. So the volunteering coverage is increasing, and over a half in Ukraine and abroad, they involved this or that way in the volunteering. And abroad is even high. I think the volunteering helps them coping with their mental health. Also, the spheres of volunteering, the first rank is to help armed forces, monetary and non-monetary support. So the involvement in helping armed forces is increasing. I think this is justified by not only the desire to help, but also the increasing links with relatives who serve in army. And that's why the participation of youth volunteering for Ukrainian armed forces increases. And the last block, before I switch to conclusions and recommendations, this is the youth participation in recovery. You see here the actual recovery actions, but the recovery as a term is interpreted in different ways by the youth. So here you see the slide showing that we have a slight decrease in enthusiasm to help the recovery process in your local community. As you see in 2023, that 42% said yes, but in 2024 it's still the majority. It's about 60, but we see that I fully support. So it's decreasing, and increased is the share of saying no. Why? I think it's because of the trust in the local government, since just the local government coordinates this process. So we check the hypothesis, and this hypothesis show it to be true. Yes, so we split the sampling in two parts, of trust and mistrust of to the local government. So again, again, the trust showed 70%, but at least we see the declaration of those who are eager to help the local government was slightly less, but still not dropping down. So what is really, let's say, also important that the youth feel themselves somehow distant from the processes, actual processes, help occurring in their community. So we judge those, but the youngsters are rather not informed about what's going on in their local community. So we asked.
In social spaces, we don't have this information, and the youth is cut off. This information is cut off for the youth, and even though they want to take part in these processes of innovation, they say that we can share information, we can spread messages, information to involve youth to these processes, at least in this area of information, because information is the first step to the involvement of youth into civil processes. Now, positive, this readiness of youth to take part for example, in the following activities, such activities as we offered, proposed some activities in society which can be part of their participation in the renovation process, and we see that this involvement is not high. The share of those who took part in this process is rather small, and it's bigger in those places where it can be done digitally. For example, leaving their signature somewhere, the spread of content in social networks. Youth is more active there, but we can also see that they declare that they want to participate in all those processes pretty much everywhere. So it is important for us not to lose this peculiarity and somehow involve them into social processes. Now, what government has to do to involve youth into this process? And the answers are these. They're quite clear, and they're based on the data. The youth wants that youth projects were supported, and it's half of the sample says that. They also say that they have to be invited. They want to see an invitation to those events. They want to be invited to youth centers, such as this one, such as the one which is going to be open in Mykolaiv. But in general, in principle, all forms of involvement, they all have support. Please pay attention to the fact that the most positive dynamics on the past question is to make more videos about activities in the society. They want to see that. They want to do those video reels. And now the last block, conclusions and recommendations. What we learned from this study. Healthcare system is a very important factor for youth here in Ukraine and abroad as well. Now, mental health is one of the most important factors for the youth. Physical and mental health is important. This is why the support of initiatives of mental health which would focus on youth are very important. This would be a very important direction of work. For example, we can talk here about increase of accessibility of free of charge tools for the youth to enter into this area, online, for example. Also, we have to make sure that we have Ukrainian-speaking psychologists abroad. Now, what mental health is all about? How is it going to be? How do we have to support it? How the war impacts mental health. Based on this data, do you need psychological support? We see that Ukrainians often say, no, we don't need. That may indicate stigmatizations, and we have to work with that stigmatization. Now, as for youth with disabilities and special needs, they were saying at focus groups that the accessibility of medical services has to be improved, increased, also, especially for people with disabilities, because we understand that the fear for safety and security was one of the most important problems for youth. As for employment, we saw a positive trend for increase of young people that study or work or employed. But we also know that Ukraine needs working people, and for this, requalification is important. We have to supply supply young people with employment. Now we also have to involve youth into discussions of all of these problems, and we have to focus centers to work with young people. Now, remote education, online education is another very important thing, especially for those young people that are abroad now, because it can be yet another bridge for them with Ukraine. And the question of double taxing, this is something which concerns those who works abroad, and they worry that they will be taxed by that country as well. As for the increase of awareness and discrimination, these are the questions that we discussed in in-depth interviews. Over here, what we may see is communication campaigns on tolerance and discrimination. Discrimination is, we have to do something about the discrimination. At the governmental level, we have to determine those cases of discrimination. This is very important. And development of national programs for the dialogue for minorities, to make sure that those people do not feel ostracized. And also initiatives on accessibility and inclusiveness for people with special needs. That work is also very important. As for bringing young people back from abroad, it's a very painful issue. What can we do here? First of all, we have to maintain the dialogue with those people that are now abroad. We also have to maintain initiatives for young people in Ukraine and abroad, and support social cohesiveness. We have to work also and maintain dialogue with diaspora. We have to communicate through civil organizations, non-governmental organizations, and also we have to develop a national programs which help young people come back from abroad and back to Ukraine, to make sure that we don't lose anything. Also for young people, another very important issue is online registration for these people. As for renovation processes, we already talked about this. I will just sum up very briefly. Youth is going to be thankful for any support of this infrastructure for young people, for civil organizations that work with youth, and youth really needs this work, these centers. For youth, they are interested in discussion of concrete issues. They want to be involved into these discussions, because we often may hear that they say, we don't know much about it, we want to be involved, but we don't know, we want to be explained, and then we will be able to cooperate with you. Now, about financing of the projects. We talked about that already. Now, support and building trust between youth and the government. What mechanism can we use? What dialogues can we use? And also support of communication and initiatives that would influence the government on this dialogue with young people, and also creation of programs for youth abroad, also focused on the processes of innovation here in Ukraine. And this is a QR code for the study. You will scan it, please, and you will be able to see all the rest of the data and rest of the information. And I am done with the information. Please scan this QR code. Thank you very much, Anastasia, for this presentation. We have a few minutes for the questions and answers. And I want to say that we also have online online presentation, so our event is being watched by people online. The questions or comments or reflections, whatever, thoughts, comments, whatever you want to share after this presentation. Thank you. I have a question. First of all, a great study, and it is very interesting. And my question is this. Maybe I missed something. Now, I would like to hear more about the sample and the number of respondents in 2024 and 2023. We can go back to that slide, but we had a sample of about 2,000 respondents in 2023 and 24, and over 400 respondents of young people abroad, both in 23 and 24, over 400 respondents. Now, I have a question, probably it's going to be a question for the Ministry of Youth and Sports. Now, I'm very glad that we see this slide now. My question is this. You said except for Belarus and Russia. And my question is this. Do you want to do anything with the youth which is now in Russia or Belarus? What shall we do with them? Because I coordinate a project for kids, school kids. And yesterday I got to know that people from Russia watch us. There's some people in Russia that watch us. And my question is this. Is there anything that we want to do with that youth, with those young people which are now in Russia or Belarus? Because we are talking about the return of young people from the West, but we also have the youth which is now in Belarus and Russia. Do you have any ideas about that? Do we have any aspirations or desire to bring those young people back to Ukraine? Who can maybe, Andrei says, I want to say that our focal point of the project of European Union, what I want to say is that the fact that you do these video lessons, those are the first steps already, because at the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine, the parents of kids who are going to have applications, any Ukrainian applications, those kids can be deported to Russia, and this is why we try to be creative. And when we develop strategy, for example, we have a strategy of cognitive deoccupation in which we participate. We also have other steps and initiatives and decisions of National Council of Security and Safety. But the first question, do we want to do something? Of course we want to do something. Now another question, can you do that? Well, that is a harder question. We have 14 people in our department, and we have a very small budget for the whole youth, the answer will be hardly. Can we initiate some process? Yes. How can we do this? We don't know yet. Now we are discussing this, having this philosophic discussion, 2040 to discussion, and in this sense, we are talking here about the people that believe in Ukraine and people that we lose. But there are people that remain in those territories. Those people fight, but they hide it, but they fight. But we also see from the study the problems, the psychological problems which young people have in European Union. I would say that what we try to do now is we try to support the youth in EU, because those are our partners. EU is our partner. We want to create conditions for that. But our minister, when he had a speech in Brussels in May, I actually also had a speech at that meeting. But we can show you this digits about the need in psychological support. And one of the conclusions was that to keep those young people connected with Ukrainian counterparts is something which helps their psychological health. But if you look closer at this, then we'll see that we don't have any clear approach to that work. This is why I would not want to say things such as, with all respect to you, Irina, I wouldn't say, I wouldn't form the question as, do we want it? Of course we want, and we understand.
So I'm telling this not like a comment. Yes, we can take a lot from this research. We can show a lot from this research to our international partners, namely this week, and tomorrow we'll get the trade union youngsters, so we can show this research over there, namely for them to help them to identify the focus in economical sphere, also to show to our partners on mental health, on mental health support, and to the local governments. You have to show the figures about the participation and desire of youth in recovery process. So I've been to several meetings, and I always support the thesis that in case you don't do anything for youth, you don't include anything for youth, since we will have the youth programs over there, and since for you to organize the youth spaces, it's just to give a premise, but this premise should work. And if you don't do that, you will lose the youngsters, will get the depopulation, and these economical opportunities will be taken by someone else and not your local youngsters. And that's why, getting back to Irina's question, I think we can even we cannot even give the actual numbers where the youngsters, some youngsters stayed. I mean, those who stay in under the custody, or those who lost their parents, for example, during the Mariupol attack, or those children who have been kidnapped and forcibly transferred to Russia. These are hundreds of thousands of youth and children. I don't want to voice the actual figures, so we cannot even really calculate, but the figures are really big. And we realize fully that this war is also the fight for demographic resources, and that's why Russia, this is another reason for Russia to launch this war, and for us to counteract the state where the state which spends hundreds of millions of euros for let's say ideological impact on the youth. For us, yes, we have to develop the strategies in not only strategies but measures, specific measures to counteract this one. So in more than, and these should be hidden, I mean not voiced publicly, since whatever step is made by Ukrainian government in educational area, like helping the partners and so on. What I want to say, I just mentioned what happened, what happens to those who use the Ukrainian applications in on the occupied territories. So again, every step being made by Ukrainian government in the education area is monitored and responded by the occupational Russian occupational power on the occupied territory, since the so-called washing the brains in Russification process of the youngsters on the occupied territories is a very important factor. So again, what steps we have to make for us after the victory to really to have Ukrainian citizens getting back to Ukraine on the occupied territories. My name is Svetlana Vasyshin. I represent T-Changes. You know, I had to do such a research, and why I did the same survey on Transcarpathian. Let me ask whether or not you involved the rural youngsters, again, in particular from the small local communities, rural communities. Why I'm asking, since we have a big problem, since rural youth is not involved in such a process. So again, in case we have even the youth space organized locally, this space is closed after 5 p.m. and the youngsters just finished their school classes at 5 p.m. So is it a sense in there, in such a space? And again, all the measures are taken mostly in the cities and towns, but not in rural area. And I'm very thankful to UNDP for their support. They're supporting the projects aimed at rural youth, namely the project for the rural youngsters, also to have the opportunity to participate in these programs. How did you provide for the sampling? Did you include the rural? Yes, we did the representative sampling. For example, when we see that over 30% in this area is living in rural areas, so we keep it So we implement this in our sampling. And yes, the towns and villages are also covered by this research. And namely, this was one of the factors to be considered since, for example, we have the opportunity to send an interviewer to some locations to do the survey. And yes, we covered the rural youngsters. And in case you have to see the specific figures, yes, we can do the selection and to show you the actual data for rural youngsters, also for the opportunity of reaching the youth centers for the rural youngsters. Yes, we also can do such a response. And again, this is the question to the communities and the local governments, and namely in Ivano-Frankivsk Oblast, the communities are not so poor as not to be able to organize the youth spaces in supporting the youth locally. Namely, in Verkhovina district, we have close to the Ukrainian border. Yes, over there are also youngsters with their specific needs. And in case you see how many of inhabited settlements coming into this district, so it's really about the desire, whether or not the youngsters are eager to participate in the recovery. That first, and namely, about this is rather about the trust of the youth toward the local government. So that is the more important moment. So we can await different responses and different causes. And yes, we can include the rural youth in the third way of this research. But again, we know that, for example, in Transcarpathian Oblast, there are youth spaces being closed. Why? Because, yes, there is a youth space, but there's no one to attend, or no one who's eager to attend. And again, yes, there are people quite active, and yes, they can bring up their position to the local government quite persuasively, and even against Ukrainian legislation. No, I'm not calling for such measures, but we have to work out this question through really several projects. Since the Transcarpathian Oblast has its own atmosphere. Over there, it's Gaverla project, Dobra project, and other projects working Transcarpathian. But again, our international partners, they use rather some specific communities, but not the regions. But this way, I think this is, the support itself being distorted. For example, if Mukachevo community is being chosen for some international project, but host community, who's just a neighboring one, is not chosen for this project, this is not good. And so we are these projects provide the distorted data of the actual condition. And plus, we have, for example, von Mukachevo, that the infrastructure being developed and people quite active, but this is not true for the adjacent district. Again, you have to work with such issues. As when we talk about the big communities, well, they're, for example, situated from the big city, like in 25 kilometers, but the road to reach is rather bad and challenging. And so any local government will tell you that this is not the role to provide for the transportation for such infrastructure. And in case, for example, you provide some activities in the youth center, you have to consider, for example, transportation means in order to involve the youngsters around.
Very interesting discussion. I would like to talk a little bit more about methodology of the study. It was said already that the study is representative, quantitative representative, but we also had focus groups for people, young people in rural areas, and those are the things you are talking about, the absence of infrastructure, they don't even have a bus to go to a town and come back. So these problems were discussed and taken into account, and I just want to say that we just presented today brief results, but I really encourage you all to get more information about the study, for example, about in-depth interviews. Marina, I would like to few reflections. I know that today is the second day of Forum of the Cities of Ukraine, and after this event we have to go to that other event right there, so to help them understand the context of work with youth. But here's what I wanted to say. I'm very concerned, and made me happy, the slide about identification, and I realized that young people understand patriotism as a national identity, because we've seen high shares of young people and what they are ready to do in this sense, and I believe that it is very important to strengthen this work to help the youth understand what patriotism is all about. We have to do something about it. Now, second is that it was interesting to hear what youth understood in terms of participation, and what do they want to participate in, and how they want to participate, what tools. And it seemed to me that young people take into account that the work with youth is a dynamic process, and we at some point start to lag behind, and young people substitute. I think the young people don't fully understand the tools they can use, because when we talk about the participation in renovation, what do you think they understand? How do you think they understand it? I believe this is why we don't really get a real picture what they want to take part in, and these are just my assumptions, but it seems to me that communities don't quite understand themselves what they can offer to youth, and unfortunately we don't have a clear communication with youth. I would like just can add to this, especially after in-depth interviews, that our participants understand renovation very broadly, not just planting trees or building houses, but fighting corruption and fighting for transparency and accountability of local governments, implementation of mechanisms that could help us move in the direction of EU. Anyways, when we talk about renovation, we have to be very concrete about the areas in the area of social network, for example. We have to be very concrete with the youth. Dear colleagues, thank you very much. Okay, we see that we are moving forward, and I suggest that if everybody likes this idea, we were supposed to have a panel discussion with speakers, invited speakers, but I would like to ask guests that join us to share their reflections about the study, their comments. So I suggest that we are not going to have a break. I'll just want to ask our guests about their impressions from this study. Okay, among our guests we have Vladislav Yatsuk. He's the head of youth policy in the Ministry of Youth and Sports. We have also Olena from UNFPA, Olena Ursul from UN, Julia Gorchanina, the head of Nova United, and we also have representatives of organization Tvori. So please, we would really like to hear your comments and your impressions of this study. Let us do it one by one. Vladislava, how about you? Let's put a chair right here. Okay, I got a mic, I got a chair. I just want to add to what Andriy Chesnakov has said already, and he said a lot, but I would like to emphasize the local aspect, because we do a lot when they try to enter a national level, and every organization creates their own plan of renovation. Last year I participated in one of such events when a plan for renovation of Ukraine was presented, but unfortunately they forgot to submit this plan to the ministries, and so they created that plan of renovation of Ukraine, but Ukrainian ministers were not aware about that plan. I don't want that to happen now. So let's have to be practical. So let's talk about regional aspect. Every time I visit regions, I try to talk with the heads of our structural units, but ideally with the deputy heads that coordinate our activity. And when I begin to tell them about the problems, about the needs, they don't even often understand how many communities they have, what workers, what employees they have, and what they are responsible for. I don't want to name any concrete regions at the moment, but I see some people laughing already. Some people smile when I talk about this. Therefore, these plans of renovations that Andriy was talking about, they don't really have a youth component at all. And these studies are called to bring attention to those 5 or 6 very important points, clear points. We have all the tools how to change those indicators. We already have 4 catalogs of the best practices of work with youth. We don't have to invent anything, just leaf through those guidelines and implement the process. There are also addresses and telephone numbers. We can use all of that. And this is why when 3 partners are involved and neighboring regions do not want to participate in this activity, this is a problem. Now, what else I liked about involvement of youth into renovation? It's what we say about the funding of communities. Very often our partners are not registered in those communities. But little by little, the taxes that are paid, they go to those regions where NGOs are registered, and we're not even talking about local budgets. And therefore, we have the space of youth center, but we don't even have any results of that work, because the employees are NGO from NGOs. This is why, for example, we plan to renovate these visits into the regions, because there's some needs, there are requests from our partners, but we want to use a structured approach to these visits, because there are many problems with, for example, with human resources, with their competence, with their competence. So that's what. Thank you, dear colleagues. We don't have much time. This is why I'm not going to. We won't ask questions now. I suggest that we move forward. And Olena, right here with us, and she says, I just want to add very briefly, that I'm a little bit biased. Our team was involved into this study, but it seems to me that this study is such a precious product which can be used for development of youth and their youth policies. This is something that we are definitely going to do. And I want to say now that I'm not only talking about the youth projects here. What is important today, what we have to do today, is move beyond the boundaries of youth projects and cooperate with all other projects as well, because all the questions that our youth ask, those questions are addressed through other sectoral areas. I'm talking here about economical issues, about employment issues, social support, programs of renovations, and those are completely different areas, and we do have to cooperate with other sectors to make sure that with our common efforts, not just from one area, but common efforts from diverse donors that provide support to Ukraine, government of Ukraine, youth of Ukraine, to resolve those problems. It is very important to do this work. As for renovation, I think that in addition to the issue of trust that we discussed, that because about participation, another factor, when we conducted the results, we implemented very actively energy projects, buildings, large infrastructure projects, and we talked a lot about that in media. And these programs have to be run by professionals And we have to make sure that the youth sees their role in their participation, and we have to understand that renovation is not just the renovation includes many different processes, especially if you want to improve things. I'm talking about such initiatives as with Nova UA, which offers youth to also the level of smaller communities, smaller, larger. We have to have an honest dialogue, sincere dialogue. We have to understand what our youth needs and how they see their future in these communities, what they want, what kind of future they want to have. And the last thing that I would like to say is that about the study.
So it's about study reducing the indicators about the social cohesion. So that not only mentioned the first year of war, these indicators were somehow overestimated, and now they naturally going back to usual level of trust, but I think the trust is really fragile element, since you have to work a lot through, yes, in order to recover this trust and even strengthen it and increase it. But the trust can be easily ruined, and when it is done, it happens radically, since we Ukrainians, we're rather emotional people. When something happens we don't like, so the trust will drop down to zero at once, and then only by small steps the trust can be restored with the specific initiatives. That's why we need to have more measures to increase this trust and less of those factors which are ruining it. And so we have to work a lot. And let me finish with the words that, let's say, here in Ukraine, to work all together with the government, local governments, with the civil sector and all the stakeholders in order to steadily strengthen up the initiatives we've seen during this research. Thank you very much, Olena. The previous research was done together with UNFP, and now I would like to invite the colleague from UNFP to share the thoughts about mental health. Namely, since we know that the mental health is really deteriorated, and UNFP works a lot with this topic, so your speech would be of interest for us. Please.
So my name is Salma, and first of all, I want to echo the importance of not forgetting youth abroad. And I am a Norwegian citizen, but originally from Lebanon and Iraq. So I really feel with those youth abroad also that never forget their country. And the observations, the research findings are in line with our observations and our work. It's encouraging to see that youth are more willing to or open to seek psychological assistance. However, it's unfortunate that young people are, or the percentage of young people who are actually willing to talk about it is still quite low. And also, as you point out in your research, that that the fact that young people are more willing or open to talk about it indicates that there is less stigma around it. Or another shift that's pointed out in your research that that the accumulation of stress and trauma over the years is also a reason for why young people are more open to talk about it today. And it just shows how important it is to continue to create the spaces and trust, which colleagues here have mentioned, with the service providers. And I want to raise through UNFPA's YES project, our implementing partner, Martin Club, conducts needs-based assessment surveys across the Dnipropetrovsk, Donetsk, and the Luhansk region. And the latest needs-based assessment survey, which was conducted across 11 communities in Ukraine, and also included questions on mental health and access to mental health services. It surveyed 146 participants in these 11 communities from the age of 14 to 35 years old, and found that the barriers to accessing services, which is also mentioned in your research, were the lack of awareness to the services, and 27.5% answered that. 24.3% answered that there is a lack of trust in the available services, and 15.3% answered that there is no available services. And again, it just shows how important it is to find ways where we are able to reach youth, to be able to talk about their mental health, and create the safe spaces, and find innovative approaches as well, which has been mentioned, and also the community-based approach has been proven effective. And we need to, which my colleagues here have mentioned today as well, to cooperate with youth-led organizations and the young people to co-design effective interventions, because they need to be part of the development that has anything to do with them. And also schools and education systems needs to provide these mental health services in their schools, where the young people spend most of their time. And back to innovative approaches, which I think is very important also in reaching hard to reach areas, where we can use, for example, podcasts, chatbots, gamified learning ways to reach youth abroad and in more difficult to reach areas. And also, I want to also mention the importance of sustained investment in under-resourced areas where there's a lot of IDPs, for example. And to what UNFPA does, we have very effective approach or initiatives on mental health, and some of those are, for example, the Resilience 2.0 program, which equips young people to be more resilient, and a development of that, where another development of the Resilience 2.0 program is Trainers of Trainers program, which equips or trains youth workers to conduct trainings again in their communities. And so far there's been 20 trainings, and it has reached 230 individuals. And the goal is to provide them with the tools to cope with the stress and trauma. And also on other initiatives is Mola Resilience, which provides counseling services with for young people, and it also is not only individual but group counseling services. And so far, that has reached 117 individuals, where 81 of them are youth workers and volunteers. So it just shows how much of an engagement that the young people have and want to, how much involved they want to be. And I also want to mention the community resilience centers developed together with UNDP, which are safe spaces, and we need to continue to invest in those. And we also have online courses for young people to take part in, which I think is also an innovative approach for young people to gain those skills that are necessary to stand in this challenging times that they are facing here in Ukraine. And the final two initiatives I really want to mention is the Mentolochka podcast, which has reached over 220,000 listeners. I'm not sure of the exact number, the latest number, but across various platforms. And it was created by our implementing partner, Molodvich. And they have and it provides psychological support and advice, and it's not only in audio format, it's also in video format, and the fourth one is coming up now. And finally, the No Trivia campaign, that it's a social media campaign which raises awareness on gender-based violence and on mental health. And this is a very important tool for adolescents. It targets young people from the age of 14 to 17 to be able to seek psychological support using Instagram, for example, where you have psychologists. So all these initiatives is just shows how we can continue to include young people and create the spaces and allow them to be part of the decision about themselves, and also not to forget to work closely with the ministry on this topic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear Sama. Thank you for sharing about all the work that you're doing. Thank you. And і зараз переключаю знову.
And now we're switching to Ukrainian. Thank you very much. And I would like to invite Yulia Grichanina, the head of Innova United. Yulia, you came to us from Poltava, and it's very interesting to hear since you started to talk about the regional context, and we're eager to listen about your context and adaptation of the youth policy and how to overcome the challenges for youth, and namely in the regional context. Hi, I'm here in two roles as a deputy of the local council and also as the head of my organization. So lots of questions were voiced to local governments, and I really share the thoughts of the audience that the last drop in trust was shown in towards initiatives. So through this uniting the local governments, we can build up trust. I was triggered really by the statistics on how many youngsters lose the desire to get involved in recovery process, and plus the actual number of involved. For me, this is really awful numbers, and so I would like to suggest some solutions. First is the infrastructure. So these are the youth centers, youth spaces, support programs for the education and business and entrepreneurship. And I think our experience would be of interest to other stakeholders. And today, nowadays we created a hub for use of 240 square meters, uniting Poltava in a part of Kharkiv region, and some amount was provided by international partners, and namely the maintenance and staff payment was done by the local government. And so, as you see, this is how to create sustainability and support, local support. And also now we will create a career center for the youth within this hub, and also the shelter. And another message is for the local government to start investing in the youth policy. And this is not about the sustainability, it is mainly of the priority. So our experience is rather negative, since our local budget is about 5 billion of hryvnia, but only 50,000 are provided for the youth. This is really awful. This is really awful. This is not serious. Since the local budget actually has the money, but it's not about like some amusement, but this is about the involvement of youth in the recovery of our community, and then just to shift their priority.
Another element which is important for me is tools of participation, and for participatory and inclusive approach these tools are very important, and they are not that expensive. And we already talked about electronic digital petitions. They work well. 47% have a positive result in the council, and it's just in this way that we resolve the issue with transportation for kids. We have now transportation for kids, and all the villages that around Poltava, they have a possibility to use a free of charge transportation. This is why these things work. The most important thing is to use those things. Another thing is to review strategies of participation. We have to update those policies. We have to make them up to date. And also it is important to work in partnership with other organizations, starting from any event and all the way to development of normative acts. So I want to thank partners for those partners. Also, we have created a youth council which works with our organization. They have a space in this project. The council made a decision that they are going to create a youth center, and this week we received funds from private parties to develop the space for this youth center. So you begin with partnerships. So we have to work in partnerships. We have to partner with other organizations. Now, another thing about partnership that I want to say is that our legislation provides a possibility to pass powers of governance. We are talking here about social order, that social NGOs can implement certain activities instead of government. We are mostly talking here about social services such as maintenance of a hub for women that suffered from domestic violence, but the legislation provides for other possibilities as well. Shelters, for example. The potential is immense, the potential. And the key here is that we have to coordinate our actions, our activities. And if we want to teach our heads, I would begin with the school for the heads of the communities, because it's all about political will, and together we can achieve a good, positive result. That's what I want to say about participation, but there's another issue I want to talk about political involvement, political participation. I'm a deputy, and very few people want to participate in political activities. Now, if you think that politics doesn't concern you, you're mistaken. Everything are the buses, roads, concerts, everything is related. All of that is politics. It's just that you don't make any decisions, because decisions are made for you by someone else. You don't even know who made those decisions for you. And my question is, what is freedom for you? Because for me, freedom is a possibility, is a possibility of choice. And as my experience shows, we can advocate very cool initiatives, but the best way to implement them is to go into politics, gather a team, and implement those. Now, we can use internships for youth. Those internships with the possible employment afterwards, those can be very effective. So I'm talking here about people such as Andrei Moskalenko and other people like him. But one negative thing, but important. The politics today is responsible, but it's painful. It's a responsibility and it's pain, because you are now responsible not for yourself only, but for hundreds of other people. And why I say painful? Why do I say that this responsibility is painful? The good thing is that you can do great things. You can change things, but why it is painful is because we have so many stereotypes about politics that you automatically, when you go to politics, you lose your reputation. As soon as you become a deputy, you lose your reputation as of a civil activist. You become a corruptionist, you become a criminal, you're a criminal perpetrator, and irrespective of what you do. And you remember all this. This is all about volunteering. This work is not paid for, but we do have. I want to bring up something positive in the end. Maybe it's difficult, but there's no other way. We live in historical moment, and our role here is to assure these changes. We have to be here and build European country that we work for. Democratic, progressive. If you're not going to do that, and if you're going to wait until we become Europeans, no, we won't become Europeans. We have to make efforts for that to happen. So this can be hard, but we have to do it. And we have to involve youth into these processes. Thank you. Thank you for the words of inspiration and for a cold shower as well. Thank you very much. You have clearly told us how we can work together. And our final guest is Oleg Malets. He's the head of Youth Centers Tvori, network Tvori, or in English, Create. Oleg, we greet you, we welcome you here. You have received the title of Lviv is the youth capital of Ukraine. It's a very important event and a very important reward for all of Ukraine. because during the war to get such a reward, this is a serious achievement. And my question is, we want to hear your reflections, your impressions about this study, and maybe talk a little bit about the youth abroad and how this title that you received, Ukraine, Lviv, how that title can help us create a positive image of Lviv in the eyes of foreigners. Okay, this is what I wanted to talk about local self-governance and also migration processes. And I will begin by immigration. We're talking about migration and immigration. To be honest, I really want us to talk here not about return of those young people, even though the very term return is not very objective. Besides this, I would like us to talk about competition among municipalities, among towns or cities, because what we see from the study, you have two groups, those people that abroad and group which is here, but the forecast is that more and more people the youth is going to immigrate, and the fact that and many people want to migrate within the boundaries of European Union, and they get used to EU and they enjoy staying there. So some people, for example, are in Poland, and after 1 year of living in Poland, they want to understand the movement to Germany or even further will give them more possibilities and potential. Okay, so we here come to the history that our cities have to compete with European cities in terms of comfort, in terms of possibilities. And what we see here this study that you have conducted, and we had a similar study in Lviv about the quality of life of youth, and one of our insights of our analytical agency when we raised an issue, what problems they have. We talked about this hypothesis. Anyways, the biggest problem of youth in Lviv is a problem of shuttle buses, yellow shuttle buses. So we are talking here about transportation, mobility, also about infrastructure and comfort, and then safety, housing, medicine, healthcare. But the first place is yellow cabs, yellow shuttle buses. And when we talk about competition, it's a competition. It's where we lose, the point where we lose to EU transportation. We talk about healthcare. Our doctors, it's not that hard to get a visit to a doctor, actually easier than in Europe. Also, it is very easy us to wire money. We are very competitive. We have a competitive edge in many areas, but we also lose in some areas. For example, like I said, transportation. And one of our critical problems, in direct and indirect sense, it's Meyer. Let's talk about Myers as well. Have you seen Myers in EU countries? You've seen. People have seen. But if you compare we are talking about about swamp, about swamp. The point is that there are not many swamps or mires, puddles in Europe, and I got what he's talking about. He's talking about the mud and slush on the ground, and he calls it mire. This is all about, this issue is related to comfort, and it's not just about aesthetics. It's about inclusivity, about safety, about trust. We have slush under our feet. So this is something that we have to work with if you want to compete with European countries, EU countries for human capital, and that's where we lose. And that's why our people are not very willing to participate in these processes of recovery, the processes of renovation. And I understand that we have not yet offered correct, good tools to our youth, which they could use in order to get involved into these processes of recovery. Because there are many youth initiatives in Ukraine, but youth centers, and we have youth centers in Lviv.
We have 4 active youth centers in Lviv, so we cover 27% of youth, and this is not even 1/3. Since Lviv has the biggest network of youth centers, just consider it. But I'm very proud that our libraries having even more space. They cover even less use. So these are not the right instruments, and that's why if we talk about recovery plans, so when I talk to my colleague from Kharkiv, my colleague works in city council of a small town, and so he told me about the development of the community recovery plan, but no one except him have seen this plan. So that is another fact, that these plans are developed non-participatory. So these recovery plans being sent top down to the community, when talking that every community should develop its own plan, I think it's will not be surviving, since the youngsters, have to develop their own strategy, their own plans, and submitting it to the local government in participatory way. And then we have to think about how the strategy developed by youth will be implemented. We have lots of instruments, participating instruments in local budgets. We create the Ukrainian Youth Fund. For example, we already launched our own Lviv Fund. These are the institutes providing the opportunities for youth to implement their ideas in life. Not like some random ideas, like someone's wishings, or for example, I will be processing plastics. But okay, you have to show the strategic approach. In case the youth will develop really strategic approach, plus the relevant mechanism of implementation, of some specific initiative. This will be really about a good participatory approach. And then, yes, this will raise up. Thank you. Thank you. That's a super great closing words. And with that, I would like to thank all the speakers, all the participants. Vladislav Yatsuk wants to add. Just to add to what have been said by Oleg, so why these recovery plans are needed? They should be formed bottom up. I mean, why they are important and strategically important in case the strategy is developed together with the youth. And so this will be the first step in our roadmap. Next document is the regional development strategy and so on. Okay, coming back to the community level, why this recovery plan is important? Since the international partners, when they take decision on financing the recovery process, they consider first community strategy, community recovery plan. In case this plan is missing the youth component, whatever you will say about your plan, so this will not be accepted. That's why we have to advocate for the youth component to be mandatory included in this recovery plan, but not copying from your neighbor, but develop for yourself. Next, social economical indicators showing where the money will be spent, and in case there's not a single word about youth development, human capital development, this plan will not work and will not go forward. There are frequent situations when all these items are in place, but the budget solutions are not taken or taken biased. Like they quickly voted locally on some local coalition session, and that's all. And then, okay, we have just 2 million left. Okay, so they cannot be already, let's say, implemented in the budget. Okay, let's turn it. Let's change or adjust the social economical indicators. Let's buy something for school and so on and so forth. Sorry, but these are really contradictory approaches. That's why we have to use the figures of such research in order to assess the how the money is spent within the communities. I hope that the communities will learn how to manage the donor money and how to create, for example, new employments for youth and so on and so forth. Again, getting back to the strategy. The strategy can be developed for 5 or 7 years, but these are the indicators we have to follow within our work. Okay, we opened the youth center. Who will finance it next? And again, the community has to show that, okay, this is a plan. Thank you to you, the donors, dear donors, you have created this center. We will then finance it. And then to invest in the services development. But we have to bring all of this to the local council deputies, in particular to those who are aged like 50 plus, and also the owners of the community, since not always these are the people in the community who are making the decisions. So in case we don't do this on the local level, whatever beautiful legislation we have, it will not resolve such issues. Thank you very much. Thank you, Vladislav. Thank you. My big appreciation to all the guests, all the speakers, those who shared their ideas, and I hope that this discussion will be of use for everyone who watches us online, since we have lots of institutions which develop their next year plans, and I hope that all these activity areas that have been discussed in there will be of use for those from UNFP and UNDP and other organizations supporting the youth of Ukraine. And again, big thanks to all the guests, in particular the Danish House for Youth, and all our donors for their support. Since this is thanks to you that everything happened here. Thank you very much, and see you next time.